All right, welcome to this CGTN live stream. My name is Omar Khan, and we are live here in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen, which is marking 40 years of being established as a special economic zone. Earlier today, the Chinese President Xi Jinping gave a speech here in Shenzhen outlining the achievements and what's next for this city, often referred to as China's Silicon Valley. Now, to discuss this fantastic city, I'm joined by two wonderful guests. We've been talking about this all morning. We've got to hear your own stories. So for viewers tuning in for this live stream, stay tuned. We'll be hearing more about their experiences here. To my left here is Dr. Wu Haifeng, who's from the Shenzhen Institute of Finance, also spends time in Hong Kong looking at cross-border trade. And then also I have Dr. Marianne O'Donnell, who has spent 25 years here in Shenzhen, that's only in Shenzhen, an anthropologist, and has also written books about this city and the transformation she's witnessed. So a warm welcome to you both. We're still here in Shenzhen.
Yes. Thank you.
So we've been listening to the speeches earlier today, but before we kind of dissect that and get to that, for the viewers who weren't with us earlier today, I do want to hear about your stories, perhaps, what you guys, how you have come to Shenzhen, what you've seen over the years. I know you focus on economics and finance,
That's right.
anthropology, looking at the lives of the people. Wu Haifeng, Professor, I'll start with you.
Okay.
You come here, you're looking at, I guess, the business environment,
Of course.
investment.
Yeah.
What do you think makes Shenzhen so worthy of that, of attracting this and becoming this sort of trailblazing city? At least in China, it's not only Shenzhen, there are other cities. But what makes Shenzhen special in that sense?
Well, obviously, frankly speaking, right, the human kind of the talent kind of the policies actually is the main reasons for me to move from Australia to Shenzhen. Right? I used to work in the university in Sydney, or University in Australia, which is called the UNWs. And yes, the living style there is good, the pay is good, but I mean, well, the one we got offer, I mean, by this uni, well, I say the digital is completely uncomparable.
Right.
So that obviously we all need to working for life, working for living. So that is the thing. But after I lived in Shenzhen, I knew that among of my package salaries, 30% of that is paid by government.
Okay.
So they do have such the attractive plans. So if you can hire,
So you're an example of attracting talent.
Yeah, they call it
to
the
Shenzhen.
peacock plan.
Okay.
Peacock plan. Yeah. So as long as you have a talent, you can show your talents. You through all the credentials, all the papers, all the research kind of the achievements. As long as you're being registered as satisfied or testify as the global talents, you are eligible to get this plan. And this plan is very, very attractive.
Sure.
It's give you the benefits on top of your base salaries, so a percent of base salaries. So actually, that's good.
And you only
tax-free.
only came around 2 or 3 years ago.
That's right, 3 years ago actually.
Completely different for you, Marianne.
Yes.
Completely different.
Yeah.
We may have a new wave of viewers joining us on this live stream. Like I said, 25 years.
Yeah.
Again, you could probably talk for an hour about a quarter of or an entire generation, I should say.
Yeah.
But what was your story coming here, and what's actually, I want to know more about what's actually kept you here in Shenzhen.
Yeah, well, the reason you come to a city and the reason you stay are usually not the same reasons.
Definitely not the same. No, I would agree. That's not the same.
Yeah, so when I came, I was doing research on post-Mao urbanization, and most people were going to Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou. Some people were going inland to Wuhan, Xi'an. But the idea of Shenzhen as a focus for urban cultural studies was really not popular. But I was at Rice, I was in Houston, and Houston and Shenzhen are sister cities.
Okay.
And so it was actually easy to get a letter of introduction to Shenzhen University.
Because of that sister
Because of the sister
that
city,
connection,
yeah. Well, also in '94, Shenzhen sent a delegation to Houston to learn about what the city was doing, and I worked as a translator for them.
Yeah.
So I came and
stayed.
I met my husband, and my husband does theater, and we realized that so much was happening in Shenzhen. It was really more interesting to be here than to be anywhere else.
Anywhere else, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's because the things that were happening, I remember getting lost. If you didn't go to a part of the city for a year,
It changed.
it changed, and you would go back and you'd get lost. I'd get lost.
And I'm guessing back then, Baidu Maps, Google Maps were not that readily available.
There were no
for-
Google
Paper
Maps.
Yeah.
It was paper maps. I have a collection of paper maps that start in 1985. right?
The boundary of city was once.
Well, it's not just the boundary, city boundaries, it's where the roads were. It's how
course, yeah.
wide the roads were. It's where the stop signs were, because when I came, there were no bus stops.
Right. It's just wherever the bus stops on the side of the road, that's when
Where you would wave your hand and the bus would stop. And then you would say, because most of the bus drivers were Cantonese speakers, you would say "lokte," which means stop here, and they would literally just pull over to the side of the road. And then you jump off, yeah.
So, sorry to interject, but so that's some of what you saw when you first got here. Now, obviously today we're looking at 4 decades of change, of transformation. There's probably going to be 4 more decades of further changes in Shenzhen. From someone who's lived here so long, what do you think, not necessarily in an economic sense, but in terms of the social fabric or of society, what do you think are some of the major beneficial changes you've seen Shenzhen has welcomed? There's probably a lot, but maybe a few that come to mind. What are some of what's benefited the people living here?
I think never underestimate high quality infrastructure. Shenzhen's infrastructure and level of modernization is pretty stable throughout the city. There are very, very few parts of the city that are not
lacking.
That aren't on the electrical grid, that are not on the water grid. And this is huge because 40 years ago, Shenzhen had about the Bao'an County, its county seat was at Shenzhen Market. And Shenzhen Market had about 3 miles of streets.
That's right.
Very few places had electricity. The East River Waterworks was supplying water to Hong Kong, but within Bao'an County, people were drinking well water. And so that one of the biggest changes in the area was basically this integration into what we think of as a modern city.
So a wider infrastructure plan for what is today modern Shenzhen.
And why does that matter? That matters because you can start doing different things with space once you have water, once you have electricity. You can do different things with space.
You can develop a city.
You can develop a city.
Yeah, that's right.
Other really beneficial things that are, so not from that moving up a level, is that Shenzhen has a huge network between the interior and the city, as well as between the city and Hong Kong, because people are migrants, but also because historically this area, Shenzhen and Hong Kong, were part of the same county system. What this means is that you have on-the-ground connections that you could take advantage of from the beginning. So any kind of policies that allowed for movement from the interior to Shenzhen and back, or from Shenzhen to Hong Kong and back, stimulated base level, production base level commerce, and increasing trade, right?
The movement of people, I would assume, that lead to increasing trade. I want to bounce off what you just said. You said it is a city of migrants, and there's a lot of people who perhaps wouldn't be able to identify as, oh, I'm a local Shenzhen resident. And we've discussed this before about a month and a half ago, that with urbanization, which is something we've seen along the entire coast of China,
that's right,
it's great. People are moving to bigger cities.
Better life standard.
Standard of living is increasing. But I want to ask, both from a sociology perspective and an economic perspective, is so much urbanization that's going to come at a bit of a cost. That there are going to be negative impacts of, you can't urbanize that fast. Well, in your view, are there certain things that the Shenzhen model could improve on when it comes to so many people coming to the city?
Depends on which economic stage you are at. If we're talking about Western country, which urbanization has already reached 70%, then if we try to move they copy the Chinese model, it creates some harmful side effect, right? But China, I mean, back to 20 years ago, the percentage of urban within this country is even less than 30%. So 70% population in China living in the rural area, which is the education, the healthy care, and safeties and the job opportunities is quite limited. So that reason we promote the slogan of urbanization. So we try to move those cities, give them the better and a more equal kind of the opportunities to live in a better environments and to get access to better kind of infrastructure, soft and hard infrastructure, not just like a road and building, broad building, but those kind of educations, the concept, this kind of the new ideas, innovative idea. So I think the urbanization in China was good, and and so far I think the last stats currently we're speaking is about the urbanization ratio in China is about 40%, and the target is about 60%. So upon that time, I think there's still a huge business opportunities
for people to be moving to the
That's
cities.
right. That's true. Yeah.
But I've also heard, again, I want to try and get to the goods and the bads of when you really urbanize and you develop a place. I've heard people in China, they've also said, okay, we're reforming, we're opening up, we're developing, but sometimes the development is so fast. In your view, from the people you've spoken to, I guess, I suppose you could say in Guangdong and in Shenzhen, when you have such fast-paced development, of course, there are people finding good jobs, moving forward with their lives, but could that possibly create a bit of gap?
Well, yeah, I think there's one of the main challenges that Shenzhen faces is it's really great for innovation, for doing tech, and there are policies in place to attract
Those people,
talent. However, there are very few policies in place that actually help young people buy houses. The price of housing is out of control in Shenzhen.
But that is something that is often...
And so one of the major challenges Shenzhen faces is keeping married people. Right? Because if you're young and you come into Shenzhen and you work, this is great. But if you want to marry, you want to have a house, you want to have a family,
it's hard.
It's
Very
really
hard.
hard.
It's tough.
It's not only tough. I mean, one of the things that we do in anthropology is we don't think in economic terms.
Yes.
We think in terms of how many years does it take you to buy 1 square meter
That's true.
of real estate in
That's true,
Shenzhen.
yeah.
And there are parts of the city, let's say Shenzhen, especially middle-class professionals, maybe they're making 8,000 to 10,000 RMB a month. But the part of the city we're filming in right now in downtown Shenzhen, new housing can be as expensive.
200,000?
Yes, it can be for anywhere over 100,000 per square meter.
Meters, that's right.
So that is 10 months of work without eating, without drinking, without renting,
Entertainments, yeah.
So,
without entertainment, no dating, so you couldn't find a partner anyway.
And that is before tax.
And that is before tax.
so it is a housing issue that should be addressed in Shenzhen.
Well, I think that one of the things about housing isn't just about where you live. Housing is about what kind of a city do we want to make for the people here. And this is really an important question because when we look at different historic eras in Chinese history, what we see are different kinds of housing situations that correspond to goals.
Yes.
Right? We have urban goals. So during the Mao era, we have the danwei, right? And so that the way that space is organized, the way that work is organizing, the way that housing is organized helps to promote those goals. Right, so right now we're in Shenzhen and we're trying to promote innovation. We're trying to promote new ways of governing the city. We're trying to figure out what do we have to do to make Shenzhen better? What do we have to do to lead into a new era?
Right.
And how do you do that without young people?
Sure.
How do you do that without people who can get married or set up partnerships?
And want to stay.
And want to stay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's not just housing, it's also what kind of city do we want to be?
Very comprehensive. We mentioned again earlier, as we were earlier discussing Shenzhen's 40 years of being a special economic zone. Do you think the status, Marianne just gave a very detailed sort of description of what it is meant to stay in Shenzhen, the housing environment. Do you think the special economic zone in one way or form addresses some of these, I suppose you could say, concerns and things that could be improved? I know the special economic zone, we have policies, we have easing of restrictions and red tape on investment, attracting foreign talents.
That's right.
But even for the local people here, people from other parts of China, do you think the SEZ could improve on that?
Of course. I mean, just address to the Marianne's points. This is a housing problem. It's impact or influence the dignities, actually, the way of the citizens. I mean, if the housing price is too expensive, and it is harmful for human dignities, right? So I mean, they live in a very bad environment compared to people to live in the next blocks, and
Right.
it's so harmful. So it has become issues, and it's become the more and more important critical issues. So these days, I mean, we do have the policy coming out on the weekend. There are 40 new policies. One of the policies, the focusing on the reform on the land resuming. Right? Previously, in China, have the three different usage of lands: agricultural purpose, industrial purpose, and obviously for commercial purpose. Commercial included business and the residentials, right? And when the central government set up this land is for the agricultural purpose, you cannot use this land to building the factories
Right.
or the residential apartments, right? And this is the central government kind of the power or legislations. But this policy gives the Shenzhen city government a legislation power to resuming those lands, right? Not resuming the land except for the base agricultural land, because the people need to eat. I mean, we shouldn't use out all the agricultural land, then otherwise people have the problem of eating. But for the base, the agricultural lands, the industrial land, commercial land, and the residential land can be multi-purpose development and can be resuming. So that case is giving the Shenzhen city government more autonomy powers to change the land per use of land, try to lower the housing price, give a better standard living to the young generation and young people.
It is a city aimed at attracting young people, so it does make sense if policies do shift
That's right,
in the way of being a more affordable city, but still retaining sort of its cutting edge and its prowess and being a major tech hub. Now, we were listening to the Chinese president, Xi Jinping was delivering an address discussing the achievements of Shenzhen and more importantly, what's next in the development plan. And you mentioned just a few days ago, a series of policies came out. I wanted to ask, so Shenzhen is looking to internationalize. It's looking to still become a future city, but an international one. So having not just focusing on inward companies,
domestic talents, also
domestic,
global
but also being a global city for the future. Do you think there's often that comparison with Silicon Valley? What more can be done to make Shenzhen that sort of hub for attracting these foreign talents? Because of course you have foreign talents here.
Yes.
But is there room for more? Can it truly become that?
There are the huge potential, the huge gaps need to be filled out for attracting the global talents, right? So there's a very good example. So when they graduate from India, from the Israel, they finish their undergrad studies. First of all, they think about the first thing they want to go is things like the London, the New York, the Silicon Valleys, and maybe secondly think about Hong Kong, Singapore, right? So when the people think about, okay, when they graduate, I'm talking about overseas people, overseas graduates, right, from the place like the South Africa, Australia, whatever. Right? When they graduate, think about, okay, after I graduation, I come to Shenzhen. That's prove the
that's kind of the goal.
Right?
That
that's
people
kind of goal, right?
eventually think of, I want to go to Shenzhen. That's what you're saying.
To fulfill the goals, we need to change in the immigration kind of legislations, right? Again, this is the central government's limitation, central government powers. But these new policies just came out on Sundays. They gave this power to the Shenzhen city government, right? So Shenzhen city can make a new legislations, new laws to suit for the Shenzhen situations to attract for young people. Maybe in later on, when the young people, the young global talents, they want to try to visit Shenzhen, they probably don't need the visas. Or you only get the work permits from the companies.
A streamlined process.
Yeah, you can just come here, get the landing visas, and can come here to work for next 2 or 3 years. That is very good moves, I believe. Yeah.
I don't know. Since you've been here such a long time, I wanted to know. You've met, I'm going to assume, a variety of people from different parts of the world, and you have your own experiences. Not necessarily. You don't have to say their stories, but what is the feeling you get from expats and foreign nationals who come here? What are their sort of impressions of the city? Are you meeting people who are here like yourself for so long and who made it home and call it home?
I think that we were talking about this earlier. There really are, in Guangdong, two kinds of people. People who like Guangzhou and people who like Shenzhen. And Shenzhen and Guangzhou are, and if we bring Hong Kong into the mix, we're talking about 3 very different cities. And I think that one of the challenges that you have in bringing in international talent is what kind of people fit with your overall culture, right? And this is one of the really interesting questions about Shenzhen. So if you're going to Huaqiangbei, which is just down the street from where we're sitting, So makers, innovators,
Open source tech. Yeah.
open source tech, these kind of people can find a really good fit with Shenzhen.
Of course, yeah.
Other parts of the city, architects, because the city is so into architecture, architects find themselves having a really good fit with the city.
So these are two sectors you could say that kind of blend
Right,
in, kind
so-
of mix in well.
Mix in well. It's,
Whereas there's probably I'm
there are
guessing,
sections where it's
Designer,
probably not a good
yeah,
fit.
yeah.
Designers are a really good fit.
That's right.
Fashion design is a really good fit. Graphic design is a really good fit.
Yeah.
High-end color printing is
it's very specific. It's a very specific industry.
and really important for global printing, right? But let's say you're really into theater. Let's say you're really into music. Shenzhen might not be a great fit for you.
No.
Food is actually a good fit with Shenzhen because Shenzhen has food from all over the country.
That's true.
It-
That's true.
So I think, and this is true of any city anywhere,
Yeah.
you go to a city because it fits with you, not because it's a general one-size-fits-all.
Okay. And then you're just kind of shooting in the dark, hoping for the best. But so you said that it's a city that you should kind of find some sort of connection with what matches who you are, perhaps your profile, what industry you're working in. Are you also kind of implying in a way that Shenzhen should eventually become a city that can fit everything? Or is that simply not, that'd be extremely...
No one can do that. There are very few cities on the planet that are actually one-size-fits-all international, right? Even a place like New York is not overwhelmingly.
welcoming to every sort of
Well, I think,
story of
yeah,
background.
but most people don't want to become an expat. Most people want to live really great lives where they are
Yes, true.
and then visit other places.
Right.
And I think that Shenzhen is already international. I as an anthropologist, I have problems with people saying we want to become international, like somehow this is not,
Good enough.
Yeah.
well, not international, right?
It's okay to it's okay to be not
More a slogan, but yeah.
It's all right to not have a lot of visibly international people, because what we're talking about when we talk about internationals, we're really talking about a particular kind of modernization. But we're not actually talking about the fact that these buildings they're international. The architects who designed many of these buildings were either foreign or trained abroad or trained in these techniques from teachers who were trained abroad or whatnot.
That's true, yeah.
So from an anthropological perspective, if we're talking about cross-border exchange, Shenzhen has a very high international index.
Okay.
But if we're talking about how many people fit with Shenzhen and can set up a long-term lifestyle here, most of the foreigners I've known come in for 3-year contracts.
And then
And
move on.
leave.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
3-year contracts and then leave. And I believe that's probably true most places in the world, right?
It's not a long stint. You're not sort of making new roots in that location.
Well, you know, the cities that we think of as having high percentages of foreigners living are actually English-speaking countries.
Sure.
Yeah.
London and New York,
Yeah.
LA, San Francisco, Toronto. Because if you're going to be a long-term resident, you have to learn the local language.
True.
That's true.
If you're going to be a long-term resident, you have to figure out how to navigate the bureaucracy. You have to figure out how to work with plumbers, how to work with...
Even the smallest things of
small-
your,
Right.
of
And
your
you
daily
can't
routine.
live in that high-end expat
Bubble.
Yeah.
bubble.
Forever. That's true.
You have to like totally switch to on
You
the
have to
ground.
localize.
You have to
You
localize.
have to localize, yeah.
And localizing is a completely different kind of knowledge. It's certainly a different price range.
And it's going to be, and as you mentioned, it's probably going to be different from a city like Guangzhou and then compared to Shenzhen.
Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and Shenzhen are going to offer 3 different kinds
Lifestyle.
of lifestyles, both at the expat level and at the local level. And so when I talk about fitting, I'm talking about a local level fit.
And Shenzhen has its own unique style. I
Right.
want to kind of turn off what we're discussing here. You can't really not mention Shenzhen and then ignore the Greater Bay Area,
That's true,
which has
yeah.
been a major plan for
Right.
South China from the central government.
Yes.
Shenzhen, dubbed kind of the engine of the Greater Bay Area.
Innovative
it's so
engine,
close
yeah.
to Hong
That's
Kong,
right, yeah.
just across the bay. Guangzhou and Dongguan, Zhuhai. That's
Yes.
within soon you'll be able to get to
2
any of
hours
those
kind of
places
diameters, yeah.
extremely quickly.
Yeah.
Is Shenzhen going to continue being that engine of the Greater Bay Area? Is it going to be the focal point? Or is this sort of plan also going to rely on this? You look at Zhuhai, you have Hengqin.
Yeah.
You look at parts of southern Guangzhou, you have
Yes.
their own sort of free trade areas. What's Shenzhen's role in the GBA?
Shenzhen, according to the President Xi's kind of the targeting or the goals, Shenzhen is going to be the innovative hub, global innovative hub in the Greater Bay areas, right? Hong Kong maybe for in finance, in terms of trading and the education. Guangzhou maybe the designing, education, whatever. But the Shenzhen, the specific task is try to be the innovative hub. We try to attract the people with all kind of innovative, not just technology, right? So when we talk about innovative, people always think about technology,
Right.
science, mathematics, but not just.
There's more to that, right?
Yeah, more than that. I mean, designing, professional works, the florists, right? So those kind of the musicians, right? So we're looking for all kinds of overwhelmed, kind of multi-dimension or multi-layers of innovative. So
Right.
that is something the Shenzhen can offer, right? Having said that, Shenzhen and Hong Kong, I think the relationship between Shenzhen and Hong Kong is very important. Why? According to the Mary Ann just mentioned about, yes, English-speaking country are quite attractive to foreign talents, but don't forget, city like Hong Kong, city like the Singapore, right? They are dominated by the Chinese or Chinese backgrounds, but they still can attract so many foreign person, not just for the working purpose. I mean, I believe that there are over 1 million people. I mean, if they from different foreign backgrounds, they live in Hong Kong very well. They can fit themselves. People from the English-speaking country, non-English-speaking country, from the South Asia, whatever, right? They can live in Hong Kong in the perfect harmony. So that is something Shenzhen have to learn from Hong Kong. So
Right.
that is some experience Hong Kong can teach Shenzhen how to become a attractive global kind of the cities. So that is the goals of the Greater Bay Area. We try to find integrated synergies between different cities. We learn each other and we pick up the experience each other
mutual.
and give out the examples to other cities
Okay.
to make the whole areas prospects in the future.
Right. So obviously Shenzhen, as that leading sort of tech hub of the Greater Bay Area and of South China, you had also mentioned it's often defined by technology, innovation. What about those sort of other, I guess, niche parts of Shenzhen? People have mentioned there has been gentrification, finding cultural aspects of this city. Is that something you've been able to encounter during your 2 decades here? Shenzhen's culture and moving away from high tech, moving away from technology.
Well, anthropologically speaking, culture is how you do things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Shenzhen does a lot is learn. I think people would be surprised to find out how many cultural events in Shenzhen are actually lectures, are actually salons, are actually workshops. Shenzhen young people really, really love to learn.
Okay.
But because Shenzhen does not have the same level of investment in culture historically as other parts of the cities, you don't have the same level of investment in high culture, right? So you don't have a lot of theater, you don't have a lot of symphonies, or when they do come in, they're brought in from elsewhere. So I'm part of a local public art group called Handshake 302, and we do small art interventions, art projects. We work with children to do art and things like that. And people are really excited to do art in
Does
Shenzhen.
it feel new for them in some way? Is it something almost like a foreign activity?
No. See, here's the thing, and this is kind of like soccer in the US, right? More people do art and culture in Shenzhen than it actually occurs at the professional level, right? So soccer is the most popular sport in the United States if you're looking at how many kids play.
Sure, but it's not on TV.
Not on TV.
Yeah.
And so if you look at Shenzhen on the ground and what is everyone doing, you'd be amazed at how much cultural activity there is on the ground. Everyone is involved in art programs, in music programs, in theater programs, in going to lectures, and going to seminars. We run a small art project, and getting people to volunteer to come in and participate in an activity, we fill up in 20 minutes. It
That's fantastic.
our WeChat goes out, and within 20 minutes we're booked.
Okay.
But none of this has actually risen to the level of television, to the level of, where the
Can
city
become
is
famous.
The city is defined by.
that's
right. The most famous event is going to be the Shenzhen Biennale, the Architecture Biennale, which comes in every 2 years, which has actually international influence. It's very huge. But it's still at this level of very large events, and then on the ground, everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
But this middle ground of what do you do on the weekend, this is still kind of open and up for grabs.
Of course.
And I think that this is an area where the Shenzhen district level governments could actually really start encouraging
Getting involved.
getting involved in mid-level art activities, mid-level cultural activities, where it's not huge, let's broadcast to the entire city, but it's also not just,
It's supported in a way.
it's supported in a way.
So there, it seems, aside from high tech, aside from being in a sort of a digital space, there is a space, there is room for culture, the
Of
arts.
course.
Yeah.
And that is true. Often when you think of actually culture and arts, you think of Beijing, you think
Right.
of other cities in China. I want to end off. Obviously, we're talking. I think we've covered nearly every aspect and facet of Shenzhen society, culture, economy. We're discussing 40 years since being designated as an SEZ. That often can be confusing to some people. That often it's clear to some, confusing to others. It's obviously just transformed the city. It's brought change to the city. I want both of in a sort of quick shot here. What do you think is next for Shenzhen? Which direction is it heading in? What is the future? And I'll ask you right after, Professor Wu.
Well, I think the next for Shenzhen will try to build the culture, city culture. So that is going to be most important. Then you found the global talents, technology, mathematics, engineering to here, right? So how to find a way to form a city culture. Because in the end of the day, the culture is the glue to bring people together.
Well, people often do say Shenzhen doesn't have culture.
That's
but
true. That's
I guess
true. Yeah.
Marianne would disagree.
Yes, it does.
And you, for you, a sort of future outlook, be it economic, be it socially based. What do you think is next for a city you call home now?
Next 5 years, definitely agreeing with Professor Wu that we're heading towards more culture, more. But long term, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, what does it mean? I think the fact that we're moving into the Greater Bay Area, I don't think any of us know where it's going to go.
It is hard to say. It is hard to say.
Because if somebody would have asked you 30 years ago, right, if we were sitting here in 1990 when this was
Farmland.
when it was a rice field, right? When
Yeah,
this was a
yeah,
rice
yeah.
field and next door were lychees and Shannan Road was mud.
Muddy road.
It was a muddy road.
Muddy road.
And somebody would have said, okay, tell me what's going to happen in 30 years.
No one would.
No one.
No one would have suspected that the entire innovation economy would have shifted
To Shenzhen.
here,
Yeah.
in part because we didn't even have cell phones.
Right.
Right? I think that one of the really important things that President Xi did highlight is that the success of Shenzhen is not only due to what's happening in China, but also to do with how China is in dialogue with the outside world.
He did admit, yes.
And so that one of the things that we're really interested in seeing is how do we learn from each other? How do these exchanges happen? And one of the reasons it's really important for everywhere to do well, it's because whatever success anyone else achieves,
It's transferable.
it's transferable.
Hopefully.
It's hopefully
It's
transferable.
open source, hopefully.
It's open source. It's that this is what I think is really exciting about being in Shenzhen is the more open Shenzhen is in attitude, in policies, in actually everyday life, the more interesting it's going to become, but also the more unexpected.
Unexpected can be good, can be
Good.
bad, but mostly good. Mostly good.
Unexpected is, I think,
It's been mostly good for Shenzhen, though.
well, I think that this is what education is about, right? We don't train children to do one thing.
That's true.
We train children to respond to the unexpected and to take it and make it into something else.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, there's
Very much
no
so.
way this project will not, because this is one of the Shenzhen mottos, right? Shenzhen tolerates failure.
That's true.
And the reason it tolerates failure is because hopefully we are attracting people who can take that failure and turn it into a success, right?
Output, yeah.
Right? Sai Wang Shi Ma.
Yeah.
Right? Old Sai loses his horse. And
Yeah.
at first we think this is a bad thing, but then it
yeah.
turns out
Good benefits.
it's a good thing. Losing the horse is what saves his son.
That's true.
And so failure and success is also a perspective of history.
That's true.
And so, yeah, hope for the unexpected and trust young people.
Exactly.
I suppose that's the future for Shenzhen. That would be fantastic. Dr. Marianne O'Donnell, Dr. Wu Haifeng, thank you very much. I know we've been discussing Shenzhen all day. We probably want to take a break from that, get some lunch. And for everyone who tuned into the CGTN live stream, again, you can tune into all of our coverage, previous live streams, those that are upcoming in the next few days on Weibo, Facebook, YouTube, the CGTN app, and of course Twitter. Again, leave your comments on whatever platform you are watching. My name is Omar Khan. Thank you for tuning into this live stream, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.